Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Zelmer from Faces of TBI, and welcome to the Brain Health Online Summit. I'm a survivor from a fall on the ice in 2014, and myself and Dr. Jeremy Schmo from Minnesota Functional Neurology, we just saw a huge need in the brain injury community for more training and education on alternative healthcare methods for those that are still suffering from the lingering effects of a brain injury. So our goal is to help educate and bring awareness to this visible injury that affects 2.8 million Americans each year and is the leading cause of death and disability worldwide. So each day you are going to be seeing 4 to 5 speakers, and they're going to share their experiences either working with brain injury or their real life experience living with brain injury. And today I'm here with Dr. Deborah Zelinsky. She is an active member of the World Brain Mapping Foundation and Society for Neuroscience. During the past 30 years, she has developed methods for assessment of brain function, testing the overlooked linkage between eyes and ears. She consults and presents workshops internationally to optometrists, internists, neurologists, and rehabilitation professionals. Currently, she is a reviewer for the Elsevier Journal of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation and has been a scientific grant reviewer for the Department of Defense several times. In 2013, she was presented with the Neuro-Optometric Rehabilitation Association's Founding Fathers Award. Along with Donnalee Marcus, Dr. Zelinsky is featured in the 2015 book, The Ghost in My Brain, How a Concussion Stole My Life and the New Science of Brain Plasticity Brought It Back by Dr. Clark Elliott. She's also cited in the afterword of Norman Dodge's 2016 New York Times bestseller, The Brain's Way of Healing. And today she's going to be sharing with you the overlooked linkage between eyes and ears in recovering from brain injury. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Zelinsky. I am so excited.
Thank you, Amy, for having me.
I am just, I had you on my podcast a few months ago, and so I am just so excited to hear you talk again. I get really excited about the whole eye thing with brain injury.
Well, the neat thing about the eyes are that they're an actual piece of brain tissue. Mm-hmm. And it's something people don't typically know, that if your brain were made out of Play-Doh and you were to take a chunk of it in your hand and pull it forward, that becomes your retina. So the retina isn't just a thing that's attached to your brain, it is your brain. So when I'm an optometrist, and when we use eyeglasses, there's 2 ways to use them. You can put glasses on to make people see more clearly on the outside, or you can use glasses to make people more comfortable on the inside. After a brain injury, that inside comfort is way more important than the outside clearness.
Yes, and I'm excited to have you talk more about that, because you use some analogies that are just like with the mouse, it's just like, oh, this is brilliant. And you were truly the first person I have ever heard to explain that the retina, I mean, your eyes are brain tissue. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real eye-opener. Huh?
Well, it's pretty neat. There's there's electrical signals that go into your brain from one part of the retina, but when the light hits them, it changes and creates chemical signaling pathways. So there's this change from all the chemicals to the electrical signals. And then what we just published last month was a paper in a scientific journal showing how EEGs, which is when you put electrodes on the head and you measure electrical activity on the scalp, how that activity was not normal in a particular person. And we put glasses on, and poof, the electrical activity became normal instantly. And so that's the beginning of some research that an EEG specialist and I are doing.
That's awesome.
But I just had a patient today who had a brain injury about 2 years ago, and he's still wearing the same glasses that he had before the brain injury. Mm-hmm. But after the brain injury, he also had spinal surgery because it was in a car accident and he had problems with his spine. So by having the spine injury, it changed everything, and nobody bothered looking at his glasses because he still sees 20/20. And so he's not complaining of blurriness through the glasses. He sees fine. but he needs new glasses because the glasses he has are not designed for the way his shoulders and his hips are now.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, because when you have spine surgery and it changes your posture, the prescription changes too. But when the doctors are only measuring a target on a wall and they put the letters on and say, can you see them, yes or no, then his glasses were fine.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I want you to kind of touch on that whole, the startle reflex and the fight or flight that would have happened when we have a brain injury.
Well, everybody's familiar with their nervous system, and your nervous system, and people are familiar with the term nervous breakdown. So your nervous system has a comfort range, and if you're comfortable, you don't even know what your body's doing. Then there's a tolerance range where you feel your body, but it's still tolerable. And then there's a protective mode that your body gets into. So after a brain injury, a lot of people get into this protective mode because they're in tolerance like for too long, and their brain just says, okay, we're going to protect you from having a nervous breakdown. So most of the patients I see with brain injuries, they either have tiny little comfort ranges or minimal tolerance ranges, or they're just living in protective mode. When they're in protective mode, their peripheral eyesight is hypersensitive or sometimes turned off. And that's what you're saying. If somebody were put into a dark forest at night where they're scared, they're in protective mode. And the side of their eye will become extra sensitive to anything. Their ears will become sensitive to sounds, and they'll hear everything. So after a brain injury, sometimes that type of protective mode just stays all the time. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have people who can't travel in a car because the movement on the side of them bothers them. Or you'll have people who try to go to class and just the teachers moving around gives them a headache. Or they'll start to try to think and use their head inside to do a calculation, and they'll get a major headache or nausea or dizziness because they just can't function. So those are the types of things. The example you're asking about, I use a lot, and it's about a mouse running across the room. So if we're sitting here and a mouse just suddenly ran across the room and you saw a little thing moving, it wouldn't be attacking you. It wouldn't be, smelling. It doesn't have a sound, but just catching the corner of your eye is enough to make your heart rate go up. So the corner of your eye is so important because you get a full visceral reaction when something's moving like that and it's sudden. But for kids in a schoolroom after they've been injured on a playground, or workers who've had a workman's comp accident, if they fall on the job, any movement by anybody is taken the same way a mouse running would be. And they get this full visceral reaction where their body's involved, their mind shifts gears, they're tensed up, their heart rate goes up, they go in fight or flight mode. And that gets to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And so what we can do is work with eyeglasses to get them out of fight or flight mode and back into tolerance, and then eventually from tolerance down to comfort. And so it's a process, and that's what the Ghost in My Brain book talked about. Clark Elliott described things beautifully, but you start with something that calms your body, gets your body back on cruise control, and then slowly you build up your tolerance levels, and then you build up your comfort levels. And he luckily got to a point where he's better than what he had originally been.
And I think a lot of people walk around in this fight or flight mode and aren't even consciously aware of it.
No, because that's their new norm.
Yeah. So for me, whenever somebody was in my left side where I couldn't see them as well, it made me kind of like jump. Mm-hmm. Or if someone were to tap me on the shoulder, I'd jump. And it's like, this shouldn't be startling me.
Yeah, it's a filtering mechanism that most people can filter out things that are just normal, like normal movements, and they separate those from strange or unusual movements. And they only startle appropriately. But like you're saying, your brain couldn't filter out the difference. A touch by anything would be enough to startle you. Mm-hmm. And we get people like that all the time. I work a lot with other types of professionals because no one profession can fix everything. So we split things into body and the mind. And then your body and your mind each have to react to the environment. So my emphasis is eyes and ears, because that's how you take in a good chunk of your environment. And if your eyes and ears are mismatched, then the environment's going to be confusing.
Mm-hmm.
The environment's confusing, you're going to get stress chemicals in you. If you get stress chemicals in you, you're going to go into protective mode. So it's just a vicious cycle. So if I can put a pair of glasses on that synchronizes the eyes and the ears to take away the confusion of the environment, then the stress chemicals there's fewer stress chemicals, and your body feels better. And when you feel better, you open up your awareness of your environment, and you get more cues of what's going on around you, and then you don't startle as easily.
Mm-hmm.
We work a lot with body workers, many different types. There's integrative manual therapy, there's Moscatova integration therapy, there's Alexander therapy, Feldenkrais therapies. So many different types of bodies, cranial sacral, there's acupuncture. So there's so many different things you can do. Patients are overloaded when they have a brain injury because they don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And we split things into categories. So in your body, there's two main categories. One is how you feel, how am I? And a different category is where am I, knowing where you are in space. So balance and posture would go into that category. But just nausea and discomfort and the feeling of depression and anxiety, those go into the how am I category. So with eyeglasses, there's different types of eyeglasses. Some work on that how am I visceral feeling, and some work on the posture and balance, where am I category. And then in your mind, we split things into attention and awareness. So you can pay attention to details, or you can have awareness of a larger concept. And the awareness of the concept is sometimes hard for somebody with brain injuries to hold on to, because they get bogged down in the details.
Right.
And so those are the things. We get people who used to be accountants who could add numbers in their head effortlessly, and now they come around and say, my goodness, I can't even add 3 numbers without grabbing a calculator. And if I add too many numbers, my head hurts and I can't function. Or I'll get buried in the numbers and then lose track of what I wanted in the first place. So it becomes frustrating to all these people, and it's very gratifying to help everybody. I mean, it's people do not realize that the glasses that were fine before are not fine after a brain injury most of the time.
So what do you do differently with your glasses?
We put glasses for the side vision, not the center eyesight. Most eye doctors put a chart at the end of the room and they say, which is better, 1 or 2, clear or blurry? And you tell them the clearest one and they say, here's your glasses. And they do one eye at a time. But I don't do that. We certainly make you see clearly because you have to. But instead of seeing like crystal clear, sometimes we might blur the center of the eye just a little, so that instead of being able to see the gnats or the mosquitoes, you can only see the flies. And because you're talking about 20, 30 feet away, and a lot of people, their worlds are maybe 10 or 12 feet away. You don't need to see 30 feet away, teeny, teeny little letters. So unless you're driving in a rainstorm trying to find addresses. So anyway, one of the things we do differently is we prescribe not so much for the center sight to give you the clearest sight, but we prescribe for the side of the eye to give you the most comfortable glass, to make your body be comfortable without the stress chemicals. And then a second thing we do is we measure to make sure that when you put the glasses on, how it changes your auditory function. So we use glasses for listening. And that's hard for people to understand, like why would glasses make you hear differently? But they do. And there's been studies now showing that people who have autism have disconnects between their eyes and ears. So it's like watching a Skype where the person's voice is frozen. So you'll see the person moving and they'll go, blah, 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 and then you'll hear the voice after. And people don't like that. It's confusing.
Yeah, right.
That's how people after a brain injury get. The sights and the sounds are just a little out of sync, and it's just confusing and stressful, but it's so close to being synchronized, they don't realize it's out of sync.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating, and I'm sure that's a big part of the whole attention span thing.
Yeah.
I know in the beginning people would talk to me and they'd be on like their third sentence and I'd still be trying to process that first sentence.
Exactly. Well, but think of people in school trying to take notes. We get high schoolers who have sports injuries. So the teacher's talking and they'll say, point A, and that goes in your ear. And then the teacher's on point B and C. But when you're writing notes, you're looking at point A. So you're looking at the first thing that comes out. So what your eyes are looking at is different from what you're currently hearing. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to separate your eyes and ears a little bit, but you also have to be able to look up at the teacher at what they're pointing at and what they're saying. So your eyes and ears have to be synchronized or disconnected intentionally to shift from note taking to looking at the board. And if you don't have a good control over that filtering, it's really hard to function without getting either exhausted or hurting, or getting nauseous. Nauseousness is just your body's way of saying, hey, my inside nervous system is overloaded. Stop it.
Yeah. So how as a doctor, how are you measuring the eye and the ear at the same time?
I have patented a test called the Z-Bell test, and I've taught people all around the world. We're actually going to have our first certification for it in July here in Chicago. But it's a specific test where I use different tones of bells, and I have the person close their eyes, and we jingle a certain bell, and they have to close their eyes and then reach for the bell and point at it. So it works even on autistic kids or very severely traumatized brain injury patients. They still can reach for the bell. And then we use different types of glasses to alter their brain chemistry or alter what's going on in their retina, alter their eye movement position in order to make them listen more accurately. So we use the Bell test to measure for these types of glasses, and then we use some other testing also. It's I like to say that people should leave 2020 in the 20th century because it was invented in, I think, 1865 or something, a long, long time ago. And that 2020 concept isn't what's needed in brain injury patients. It's just not sufficient. You need more, because when you have the instrument put in front of your eyes to test, it covers up everything, and you're blocking off the side vision. And that's the critical part after a brain injury.
Yeah, you're so right. And I know, kind of going back, you kind of really touched on overstimulation. If you're in a restaurant and there's people talking, there's people walking by, there's TVs playing up in the distance, there's music.
And you don't filter. You can't filter after a brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put earplugs in, you can put eye blinders in, sunglasses on, but that's just like placating the symptoms. That's not fixing the cause.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're 15 years old and you get hit, or you're 20 years old, you don't want to live your whole life like that. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, so no wonder why so many people get depressed. But that's why it's like I said earlier, it's just so gratifying to have these people come in and they never thought that they could put glasses on and change their auditory and visual linkages and be comfortable. One lady came in and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm 95% better just from these glasses." And she took them to an optometrist and they said, now these are almost plain glass. And it's like, they don't have to be strong. Even people with 20/20 eyesight, that's the center part, they still need glasses after a brain injury for the side part of the eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just imagine how much energy it frees up.
Yeah.
To get that connection and those filters working.
You're totally right, Amy. The people use conscious attention and conscious effort when everybody else does it subconsciously and effortlessly. So they're burdened with all these choices all day long. I mean, think of playing tennis. If you were running around a tennis court and every time the ball came over the net, you had to make a decision and say, should I use my right hand or my left hand? Should I run or should I stop? Should I reach up? Should I swing? How fast should I swing? How should I grip the racket? If you had to do that on every time you had to hit the ball, it's exhausting. And that's what these people have to do. They have decisions even just to go out. Somebody says, hey, let's go to a restaurant. They have to say, is that going to be a noisy restaurant or not? If I start getting nauseous, can I go in the car? Is there a place I can lay down? Should I wear, earplugs? How long are we going to be there? What do I have the next day in case I get so bad I have to sit for a day and recover? You shouldn't have to do that every time somebody says, hey, let's go out.
And so someone that comes to you that maybe had a brain injury 10 years ago and is still struggling with all this, is this something you're still able to help them with even 5, 10, 15 years out?
Absolutely. The brain, that's what Norman Doidge wrote about, how plastic the brain is. There's something called neuroplasticity, meaning your brain learns and changes even if you're in your 90s. And so Clark Elliott's book, he was 8 years out, that he had these problems for 8 years. We have many patients who are 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. I have one person who is 28 years after an injury. She's probably the longest one I have. And of course, it's much harder to change somebody with a 28-year-old habit. But like today, I had somebody who just had a concussion a week ago, and they're having lingering symptoms, and we're told by the doctor, well, rest and recuperate and see where you're at in a few weeks. But the person said, wait a minute, I'm going to get treatment now because I want to nip it in the bud before my brain develops a new habit.
Yeah.
And so that one's going to be super easy to treat.
Yeah. And, there probably is a fine line between how soon do you go in and, how long do you wait it out? I don't know if I could have handled it early on.
Well, it depends how bad it is. I mean, I think there's some statistic somewhere that's approximately 80% or even 90% of the patients do get better on their own after a few weeks or a few months. I don't know the exact statistic, but it's an enormous, overwhelming majority will get better all by themselves. What I see is that small part that doesn't get better. So my practice is filled to the brim with people who haven't gotten better. And they keep saying, I had a boy who's, I think he's 22 or something, and he went to the doctor, the neurologist, and they kept saying, man up, stop complaining about the lights, you can deal with it. And you can't. It's debilitating. I mean, it's horrible what these people go through. I mean, our employees are very used to having to turn all the lights off in the waiting room and not have any noises. And even with the bells, for some of my patients that are sound sensitive, we have to hold the bells a certain way to make sure that that the sounds are muffled. Otherwise, it's too stressful.
And I think that's so important as a doctor when you're dealing with these types of patients to understand that, I go to my neurologist's office and it's bright and they have that crazy carpeting that makes you dizzy. It's like, who thought of this?
You can see, here's my carpeting, the brown that's on the back over here. It was chosen on purpose to be because you can't have decorated carpeting. You have to have something that's close to neutral.
And, and that's a good point too. The carpeting, I mean, like that's your, that goes right back to, that's your peripheral vision seeing that when you're walking, and it can cause your heart to race.
But even colors can, like today, like I had a jacket on top of this shirt, but because it's colorful, there are some patients who cannot take colorful things. And what they might wear, we had a boy who was wearing, at one point, orange clothes. He had an orange shirt on, and when I was testing him with different colors, he was reacting very poorly to orange. And I commented to his mother and I said, gee, it says that orange is not good for him, and yet here he's wearing an orange shirt. And she said, he looks so cute. And mother liked orange, so she dressed him a lot in orange clothing. So we did an experiment and we had him buy navy blue clothing. And he became, instead of a little monster with a bad attitude, he became a little angel. And the mother was like, had I known it was the color of his shirt with the light bouncing off into his eyes, she had no idea. She would have bought him navy blue from the beginning. And we've had people with their bedrooms painted a particular color. That, we had a little kid who used to sleep in his father's bed all the time, and they didn't realize it was because of the color that his bedroom was. And then we've had a different little kid who used to sleep in their parents' bedroom because of the angle the light came in, that his bed was set so the window shined the light straight into his eyes, and the father's bedroom the light was sideways, not straight in. And so all he had to do was move his bed a different direction, and then he was fine. He stayed in his own bed. So people don't always think of, well, which way does the light come in your window in the morning? And, gee, changing the way I sleep in the bed will make a difference in my sleeping patterns.
Talking about colors, you do tinted glasses too, correct?
Sometimes, if we need it, we use two kinds of tinted glasses. Sometimes we put a tint in the actual glass that's very pale, and other times we'll use cardboard glasses that are tinted to wear at home for a minute or two in the morning and the evening. And the frequency of the light going through the eye changes the brain chemistry in different ways. And so you kind of get a boost in the morning and a boost at night.
Mm-hmm. What about working on the computer or a tablet or any sort of screen?
Well, there's the programs, like there's a night shift for iPhones that take away, and then there's another program for regular computer screens. I forgot what it's called, that takes away the blue light too.
Oh, like an app you can download on your computer?
Yeah, it's like an app on the computer, but it takes away all the blue light. I can find out if you'd like what it is. I don't remember.
Because I know I keep hearing about blue light and how we need to filter more blue light.
Well, you need to filter it out somewhat, but you need a little bit of it because some of it's good for you. I mean, like everything in moderation.
Right.
Let me see if I could figure out. I was trying to check to see if I knew what that name of the app was.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest complaints I hear in my Facebook group are the computer. Like they have a hard time being at their computer for more than like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then the overhead fluorescent lights, especially people work in a cubicle, they have that horrible lighting in their desks. And, that's a challenge to work through too. Is that something you're able to kind of address with your patients?
It is.
Aside from just not using it?
Yes, it is. Because again, the flickering off the computer screen bothers them often because their right and their left eyes are not synchronized with each other. And sometimes it's a really tiny change in the prescription, but changing the prescription so they're balanced takes away all that discomfort. It's called Flux. There we go.
F-L-U-X?
F-L-U-X, but it's F.Lux.
Okay.
There you go. That's the software. I knew I had a name that I had heard.
Good job. What were we saying? Oh, about the computers. And I know the other thing is scrolling. And that was my trigger. When I was scrolling, it would just make me like, woo.
That's peripheral eyesight again. Again, we talk about the letters at the end of the room in a chart. They don't move.
Right.
And there's no reaction time with them. And you're seated. So you sit as long as you need to with your eye covered looking at the chart. And you take your time and you say, and I can twist around and figure out what the letter is. But the scrolling, you have to filter and kind of ignore it. The scrolling goes back to that mouse example. Something's moving on the side of your eye. And if the side of your eye is hypersensitive because your brain is in fight or flight mode because it thinks it's in a forest at night, then everything's going to bother you. So it goes down to making your body comfortable and making that how am I pathway feel good. And I use an analogy often of a house being built. So if we're trying to build a brain, and when you build your brain, if you are sitting on quicksand, your foundation is on quicksand, it doesn't matter how many physical therapists, occupational therapists, neurologists, no matter who's working with you, if your whole body is on quicksand and not solid and concrete, you're stuck. So you have to first get the foundation, first get your body stable, and then your brain can deal with executive functions and the environment. But you're going to shrink your awareness of the environment the minute your body's not comfortable. I mean, if you had to throw up and you were really nauseous, you are not going to be looking around and noticing flowers all over the place and wallpaper. But if you feel great, you would, because then you're busy. If you're in a great mood, you're going to look around and say, hey, look at this. And so your awareness expands and constricts depending on how you feel. And after a brain injury, people's awareness either hypersensitizes or it shrinks. And that's where you get depression and anxiety kind of mixed together in some patients, because the part that shrinks makes them depressed and the part that hypersensitizes makes them anxious. And it's all chemistry related. You know, depression and anxiety are different chemicals that are too high or too low. So again, going back to being an optometrist, being able to change brain chemistry, you know, I mean, I see the future 22nd century medicine is going to be, hey, let's go to the optometrist, put some glasses on and increase serotonin levels. You know,
yeah,
Prozac is a, you know, like, or Zoloft, those types of things. They're for keeping serotonin in your body, but you can produce it just by putting certain glasses on.
yeah, you know, and I think the medical community is too quick to give out Prozac and other drugs without trying other things first.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's out of my field of knowledge, so I don't know. But I think some people really need that to calm their systems down.
Right.
But it boils down to tools. My tools are glasses and different kinds of filters. Sometimes we can put just like blocking out filters on glasses in strategic spots because the brain is mapped point to the retina. So like a certain spot on the retina will be linked exactly into a spot in the brain. And if you know where the brain damage is, then you can block out that spot that's linked with it and make information coming in more comfortable. But those are my tools. And when you go to, you know, other doctors, psychiatrists have other tools. They have medicine. So, you know, medicine is not a bad thing. It's a good thing if you can calm the brain down. But sometimes if you can calm it down in, you know, a more natural way, it might be easier. Sometimes you can't.
What about people with convergence problems, being close and then far?
What about them? What do you?
Like what problems do you see with that, and how are you able to help that?
Well, convergence is one of the last things you do. Convergence is something. It's another word for convergence is aiming your eyes, pointing them at something. So first, you have to select a target to bother pointing at, and then you have to decide if you're interested enough in the target to warrant converging on it. So, like for instance, if I just glimpse here and I see my cup of water, I don't have to converge on it to know it's my cup of water. I just glimpse and there it is, and I can pick it up. So a lot of people after brain injuries don't converge well, and they're labeled with convergence insufficiency, but it's because they're too fatigued to bother putting the interest and the energy onto converging. Most of them are able to converge. They just choose not to because it's too stressful for them. And before you converge, there's a lot of other steps because you have to have, you know, how your body feels. If I don't feel comfortable, I'm not going to bother converging when it's not important. And it's where you are in space and how balanced you are. Because if my posture is off or I'm not feeling good or my back hurts, I'm not going to bother converging because that just makes extra muscles move. So a lot of children at school or people with brain injuries, they measure convergence insufficiency because they're given a boring target on an eye test and it's told, you know, here, watch it, let's see when you converge. And they converge and converge and converge, and then the target gets close enough and they stop converging. And they get marked as convergence insufficiency because other people can come all the way to their nose. But it depends what kind of person it is. If they're a person who's conserving their energy, they're not bothered. You know, if you said, I'll give you $10 million in cash if you can converge all the way to your nose, that's enough incentive for people to actually really work at it. But that's not what they're given. They're just said, here, watch this thing and see what's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember getting that test of following the thing, and it was like, oh, it hurt.
And you'll do it if you have enough incentive. But when it's just a plain test where they say just here, do it, there's no prize for it or anything, then most people, when it hurts, they stop.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people labeled with convergence insufficiencies that what it really means is that somewhere along the line before convergence, something's not comfortable. And you have to figure out, so my job as an optometrist is to say, okay, there's this and this and this and this and this before convergent, where does something break down?
Yeah, that's a fascinating way of looking at it. I've never heard it explained like that before.
Yeah, well, but it's again, outside and inside. The convergence happens on the outside, and it happens with your mind. So you have your whole body And if your body's not on cruise control, that's going to affect convergence. You have the shrinking of the awareness, that's going to affect convergence. You have interest and attention, that's going to affect convergence. And then you've got your peripheral eyesight. If you can glimpse and know what you're looking at, you don't have to bother converging.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a very well-known term in optometry, and insurance companies pay for a lot of convergence insufficiencies, so it's used a lot, and it's measurable and quantifiable. But the cause of it, you could have 10 people with convergence insufficiencies from 10 different reasons. So the 10 different treatments would be, if it's a nutritional cause versus a fatigue cause versus a posture cause. There's just lots versus a mental awareness. There's many causes. So I've actually got an article on the different steps, and like reading is the same way. If you have convergence insufficiency, often reading is difficult, but there's all these other steps in reading too. So it's important to assess patients in a lot more than just can they see, yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to make sure we talked about? Any final words of wisdom?
Well, when you're seeking out help after a brain injury, it's good to check out the practitioner you're using, because, for instance, many times I've had patients see an eye doctor and their eyes are checked, but they're done where they're seated. So one question that one of your viewers could ask the doctor is, are any of the tests done where we're walking? Because if all of the eye testing is done seated, but then you go in real life and walk, you're not getting your peripheral eyesight checked well enough. So we check people when they're walking as well as when they're seated, and then you can ask, are you using moving targets as well as stationary targets? Because that's very important. And then the auditory and visual linkages, are they using a Z-Bell testing or not? But basically, how are you prescribing for peripheral eyesight or central eyesight?
And where would someone find a doctor like you?
Well, eventually, we have a buildabrain.com website, but it's not up yet. It will be up after our certification in July, and there'll be practitioners listed from around the country. Right now, there's a doctor in Iowa, Deanne Fitzgerald, who's wonderful. There's Sue Durham, who is in North Carolina. There is Rosalie Hopkins, who's in South Carolina. So there is different, Amy Thomas is in Tucson, Arizona. So there are many doctors starting to become certified. So after July, there should be many more. So I guess they should check out Mind Eye Connection or buildabrain.com in the future.
Awesome. That's great that you're building a resource for that.
Yeah. Well, right now it's people in other countries. I mean, there's Stefan Guba in Austria is fantastic at this. If I were anywhere near Austria and I had a brain injury, I'd go running to his office.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
And then, Deborah, you also have a special offer for our listeners. Mm-hmm. They can purchase Open Your Eyes and Listen.
Yeah, I have, oops, I should have had one here. Stay here, I can get one.
Absolutely.
Oops, sorry. Here is Open Your Eyes and Listen. It's a booklet that lists some of what we were talking about. The where is it, the how am I. And it's done in cartoon form. So for instance, here's a decision you have to make on should you put information outside or inside. If you can't decide that, you often find people who are fidgeting or daydreaming. And then here's a patient who has to make a decision of whether to pay attention to a big picture or details. Somebody who doesn't do that can run out of space, go off on tangents. And then there's these labels that doctors will put on you here. Oops, let's see, there. Mm-hmm. All the different labels. So visual processing, word retrieval, organizational skills, spatial skills. So it's split into sections. It's got plenty of cartoons, but it's written so that it shows you what eyes can do and it talks about how you have muscles, decision makers, and memories. At the beginning, when you were talking about Donna Lee Marcus's work, which is also written in The Ghost of My Brain, she works with information processing here, and I work more here. So they dovetail together quite nicely. The work.
Awesome.
But this would be the book we were offering.
And the link will be under this video if anyone's interested. And you are offering that, I believe it was $12.
Yes.
Literally $35.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. I learned so much.
Well, it's great to listen to you, and all of the things you've done for brain injury are incredible. Like you were telling me earlier that you're donating proceeds to the Brain Injury Foundation. That is such a that needs more funding because, like you said, somebody had told me that there's more people with brain injuries than heart and cancer combined, or something like that. I mean, some astounding statistic and yet Brain Injury Foundation is doing more with a tiny budget than the cancer research is doing with a humongous budget. So
yes,
great that you're contributing to it. People can look up to the worldbrainmapping.org. That's got so many things for brain injury in it also.
And what was that?
Worldbrainmapping.org.
Worldbrainmapping.org.
It's a fantastic organization, and there's all kinds of things to read about. They have a video library that they're putting together that would be very useful for patients too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The more resources, the better.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zelinsky. It's a pleasure as always.
You're welcome.
And
thank you, Amy.
Everyone who's been watching. Just remember, you are not alone in brain injury. And if you're not able to catch all of the live speakers, you can purchase all the recordings for $29. And as we just mentioned, the proceeds are going to the Brain Injury Association of America. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Dr. Z.
You're welcome. Bye.